Back in '93, Eric Smith made headlines as the 13-year-old who brutally murdered and sexually assaulted a 4-year-old boy in Savona, New York's version of Mayberry, population 900. Now, the red-haired, freckled-faced killer is all grown up. Raised by the prison system for 27 years, denied parole 10 times, Eric Smith is now a free man at age 41. But as my mother might say, is he sorry for what he did, or sorry he got caught? Will Eric kill again? The prosecutor who put him there thinks it's possible. Should we? Let's talk about it. I'm Chris. This is True Crime Recaps. 6 minutes after his mom kissed him goodbye at 9:10 a.m. on August 2nd, 1993, 4-year-old Derrick Robie was dead. He was walking down the block to the park on his way to summer camp. The morning was a hectic one at home. His mom was running around after his fussy baby brother, and he was anxious about being late. Derrick was a fearless, feisty little guy. The town was safe, and the distance between his house and the park was only about 100 yards, but he only made it halfway. For years, some of the worst details about the attack were kept quiet. The sheer brutality, the shocking things that were done to him. And then, 10 years after that horrible day when Eric came up for parole in 2003, his victim's mother told 48 Hours that she wanted the whole story to be told. Only then could people understand what kind of monster Eric really was. As the prosecutor said, quote, Eric could have simply killed Derrick, but he didn't simply kill Derrick. This is what happened. Eric was riding his bike on his way to the same park where Derrick was headed when he passed him walking alone. It took him 3 tries to lure the little boy off the sidewalk with the promise of a shortcut, but instead he led him into a cluster of trees where no one could see them. Once they were out of sight, Eric let him get a little ahead of him so he could grab him from behind to choke him. After about 30 seconds, he thought he was dead, so he laid him on the ground, but Derrick was more of a fighter than Eric had bargained for. He gasped for breath, so Eric stuffed a paper napkin in his mouth. He got it out of the lunch bag Derrick's mom packed for him that morning. It held a sandwich, a banana, and a thermos of Kool-Aid. But Derrick managed to spit out the napkin and keep screaming, so Eric tried to gag him with the sandwich bag, but Derrick bit his finger, so he hauled 2 big rocks over, one weighed about 24 pounds, and he dropped them repeatedly on the boy's head and chest, crushing his skull. Then he turned his attention to his lunch bag. Eric raided it, first stepping on the banana, then slowly and methodically pouring the juice into Derrick's wounds. But he wasn't finished with him yet, and I have to tell you, this is hard to say and even harder to hear. In one final twisted act of brutality, Eric pulled down Derrick's pants and sodomized him with a stick he'd picked up off the ground. Then he dragged his body to a pile of rocks, and for reasons only he knows, he took off the boy's sneakers and placed each one next to his lifeless hands. Only then, with the body posed like that, did he get back on his bike and pedal away. But he didn't stay away. 5 minutes later, he came back. According to court transcripts, he told the police he wanted to double, triple check to make sure he was dead. I was worried if he wasn't there, he might say something. However, I figured if he's dead, and I believed he was, I wouldn't have to worry about anything. Around 11 a.m., a storm broke out. Now, when that happens, the day camp is canceled, so Derrick's mom was expecting him home. When he never came back, they realized he never made it there in the first place. His body was found within hours. So I ask you, was that a one-off moment of rage from a boy not old enough to control his anger, or something more evil? Brutal, twisted acts, each one worse than the other, all committed for the sheer joy of it? That's the word the investigators used later when they described Eric's behavior. Now keep that word joy in mind as we jump ahead. Because Eric didn't run away, cry, and confess, or black out. 3 days later, he and his mother went to the police command post to share some information they thought might be helpful. Eric said he had been to the park that day, but at first he claimed he didn't see Derrick. But when police went over to his house later that night to interview him again about some discrepancies between his statements and other witnesses, he suddenly changed his story. He had seen Derrick, he said. Interviews with investigators in 48 Hours painted a picture of an eager Eric, happy to help, excited to play detective, and unknowingly giving himself away as the real killer. Step by step, they walked them through his movements that day. When did you see Derrick and where? What did you do then? His answers were unexpected, to say the least. The details he mentioned could have only been seen by someone physically close to Derrick. Not only that, but Eric specifically would need to be close by since his glasses had been broken for several weeks. And when he mentioned how cool Derrick's lunch bag was, the hair on the back of their necks went up. He had to know more than he was letting on, so they pushed it a little harder. How could he have seen those small details from across the street? That's when Eric changed. His head went down, his fists came up, and he asked the question, "You think I killed him, don't you?" Then he threw his Kool-Aid all over the floor. Again with the Kool-Aid. It was too much of a coincidence not to wonder if this kid had actually seen the crime scene. When they asked him if he saw anything else, he said, "I'm not the type of person that would kill, hurt, or sexually molest anyone." Okay? That's when the interview ended at his grandfather's request, according to the court transcript. The next morning, they met the police at the park so Eric could recreate the moment he saw Derrick. But it quickly became clear that he couldn't see things clearly from across the street. By the end of that day, it was obvious he was holding something back. They wondered if he had seen the killer, but no one believed he could be the killer. How could they have been so wrong? Why did he do it? Eric's bright red hair, thick glasses, and general awkwardness made him bully bait on the school bus and at home. He was a victim who wanted to take back control. Now, that's a quote from grown-up Eric to the producers of A&E's Kids Who Kill. And it's a sentiment we can all understand. Or, to put it another way, if this was a Disney movie, Eric would have found the courage and strength to stand up to his bullies, to show them he couldn't be knocked around anymore by them, and we all would have cheered. But this is not that kind of a story. The middle boy between two sisters, Eric's life at home with his mother and stepfather was almost as unbearable as school. His stepdad described himself as a strict disciplinarian. Others in town described him as violent and abusive, according to the Buffalo News. And Eric spent a lot of his time with his grandparents and the neighbor family. Now, with them, he was just a sweet kid. There was more going on behind closed doors at the Smith house than people realized. According to trial testimony, Eric knew he was reaching a point of no return. He told his stepdad he was worried he was going to hurt somebody. Now, how did he respond to his son's pleas for help? He told him to hit it out on a punching bag. Eric bloodied his knuckles hitting a tree instead. It took the murder of a 4-year-old for him to be diagnosed with intermittent explosive disorder, which is exactly what it sounds like. And what about the fact that he sexually abused Derrick? Why would a 13-year-old think to do that? Was he also being sexually abused? The question was asked repeatedly both before and after trial, but he always said no. His older sister, however, claimed she was molested by their stepfather. But when it came to Eric, the only concession he ever made to that kind of abuse was in his 2014 parole hearing, when he said an uncle tried to touch him, but he left the room and it didn't go any further. When the parole board pushed him about why he would have done such a heinous thing with the stick if it wasn't motivated by some kind of perverse pleasure or abuse in his own past, here's how he answered. Quote, "At the time, I put my hand on his chest and I could still feel his heart beating, and my thought was that he was going to get up and I was going to get in trouble because he was going to tell. And the only thing I could think of was to stop his heart, and I couldn't think of anything else to stop his heart than using the stick." So, there it is, a killer's explanation 21 years after the fact. After the murder, Eric spent most nights having dinner with the neighbors, and he didn't avoid the topic on everyone's mind. He had plenty of questions about the murder. He was especially interested in DNA. What kind of information could that give police about the killer? And once he even asked what would happen if the killer was a kid. They didn't think anything about it at the time, but secrets don't stay secret for long in such a small town, and little details about the crime scene started to spread. Theories emerged around dinner tables, and one of those theories made its way to Eric's neighbors. Remember the banana in Derrick's lunch bag? Remember how Eric stepped on it to crush it? That little act of aggression in the middle of a horrific crime scene stuck out. Would a grown-up take the time to mangle it so purposefully? People started to whisper. What if it was a kid? When she heard that, Eric's neighbor started to worry. It was the second time she'd heard it. The first time was from Eric himself. So she told 48 Hours about a little trick she pulled to prove she was worried for nothing. Banana splits. She got all the ingredients: ice cream, whipped cream, nuts, cherries, and bananas. Eric took the treat, but refused the bananas. He didn't like them, he said. 2 days after Derrick was buried in the baseball uniform he was so proud of, Eric told his family what he did. He said he lost control. He claimed he didn't know why, but it took a decade in prison and one failed bid for parole for him to simply say he was sorry. Even now, it's hard to imagine how anyone could do something like that to a 4-year-old. They weren't on the hunt for a deranged drifter or any other adult. The twisted killer they were searching for was right in front of them, just a kid drinking Kool-Aid, the same drink he had used as an instrument of torture. On August 16, 1994, a jury gave him 9 years to life in prison. He's been behind bars for almost 28 years. Most of that time served in a maximum security prison in upstate New York, which means, for all intents and purposes, he was raised by prison guards and other rapists and murderers doing their time alongside him. He spent his days earning his GED, going through sex offender treatment, and writing poetry about his fear of being trapped behind walls and razor wire forever. He's also been denied parole 10 times. 48 Hours gave us a glimpse at some of the transcript from an attempt in 2004. When asked if he enjoyed strangling Derrick, he answered, quote, "At the time, yes." When pushed for a reason why he did it, he talked about being bullied to the point where he couldn't take it anymore. An innocent victim of his own was the only way he could feel better. A cynical person might suggest that with each no from the parole board, he learned more about the ins and outs of the justice system, what to do, what to say, how to act. An optimistic person would hope he's learned how to handle his rage disorder because, unfortunately, life is full of bullies, especially as an adult. And a suspicious person would point to the depravity of the murder, the sexual assault, the posing of the body, the idea that he would insert himself into the investigation afterwards. That's serial killer 101 stuff. Has he changed so much over the years? After all, our prison system isn't known for its rehabilitation. But Eric claims he's not the monster he was at 13. And on his 11th try, the parole board agreed. His tentative release date is November 17th, 2021. So where will he go? The Robie family still lives in Savona, and it's unclear if the Smith family still lives there too. According to 48 Hours in 2004, the two families have never spoken, but others in the community raised their hand to help cleanse the town from the horror of that morning in August 1993. Volunteers tore down the trees surrounding the crime scene and turned it into a baseball field in honor of Derrick. It's doubtful Eric will try and return to Savona, but in his 2014 parole hearing, he said he had a friend he'd grown up with that offered him a job and a place to live if he was released. We have to assume that friend moved out of their hometown, right? He was denied parole in 2014, but now, almost 28 years after the brutal murder, the hypothetical is real. He's getting out. So, the question is, where will he go? How will he handle daily stress and pressures? Is he a changed man or just a better criminal? What do you think? Thanks for spending this time with me today. If you like getting all the crime in half the time, please subscribe, hit the bell, and give this a like so you never miss a new recap. Amy and I are here every week, so until next time, take care.